Welcome to The Blueprint of a Killer. This series is for you if you've ever wondered why. Not just who did it, but what made it possible. What made it inevitable. If you've ever wanted to take a step inside the mind of a killer, not to excuse it, but to understand the machinery of it, this is where we begin. In every episode, I read the energy. I pull cards. I map the psychic blueprint behind the crimes. And then I feed that reading into artificial intelligence. And I ask, would someone with this exact emotional code do what this killer did? This isn't about sensational stories. It is about soul-level architecture. This is psychological autopsy, a spiritual forensics lab, if you will, an intuitive profile tested by machine logic. Because the truth doesn't hide in the evidence, it hides in the pattern. And once you see it, you'll start recognizing it everywhere. Because some patterns don't just point to the past, they predict the next fracture waiting to be seen. This is more than a reading. It's a reckoning with the part of humanity we lock away. And if you're ready to face it, let's begin. In the fall of 1888, in London's Whitechapel district, 5 women were murdered with surgical precision. Marianne Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly were all mutilated, posed in the streets like messages only the killer understood. The press dubbed him Jack the Ripper, a name that grew larger than the man ever was, a myth, a warning, a shadow that never got caught. He was never identified, never tried, never humanized. But what if the answers we seek aren't in his name, but in his pattern? Today we find out. Welcome to episode 1. Jack the Ripper, the birth of the myth, the burial of the man. Today we look inside the pattern and take a psychic profile of Jack the Ripper. Welcome back to part 2 of the Jack the Ripper series. In the first part, we looked at the construct itself. Now we're going to look at the deconstruct itself and then put the whole thing into AI and see if the profile from the cards matches the profile from the killer and if it can give us any new insight on the killer. As always, this is an energy reading. It's all alleged, my opinion, not fact. So first, we're going to look at the first high. What emotions surged after the first kill? What emotion was the most present? I feel exposed because I feel like I'm finally seeing myself for the first time. After the first kill, if I were to describe the state of mind that I see with this, I would say I feel like I've found myself for the first time. I feel like I see my truest reflection of myself. Like this has shown me, oh, that makes sense. That's who I am. That makes sense. That's who I am. It's dark. I understand why I didn't want to show it before, but that makes sense. That's who I am. That makes sense why I was always an outsider, why I always felt different than everyone else, because this is who I am. Eight of Wands, it hit me like a slap across the face. Like, I do this act and immediately I am looking in a mirror at the most honest reflection that I've ever seen of myself, and I'm not afraid of it. I feel like the first kill confirmed to him why he had always felt different than everyone else, and it almost validated him to do more. You can find yourself here. You deserve this. I almost see him saying that to himself. It's finally time to discover who you are, that they never let you be. And it feels like that is a macrocosm of the microcosm of what his mother and their relationship kind of caused within him. Yeah, solitude with the hermit. I always felt alone. Now I understand why nothing ever worked, why I always had to fight against. See how the 7 is like with the devil there? It's like why I always had to fight against these seeds that just felt like they kept being planted. Like I would move past one train of thought that wasn't good and I'd immediately have another one. It's the energy of now it all makes sense to me. Now it all makes sense to me. So if I could describe the emotion in terms of a shadow, what shadow stepped into the light most prominently right after that first kill? The wound of the quiet apology, shrinking in advance just in case. It's giving the beast unleashed, because the opposite of this shadow stepping forward would say, I've shrunk my whole life and I'm not doing it anymore. I'm going to be loud. I'm going to be bold. It's my apology to myself. I finally get to figure out who I am. You learn to preempt conflict or rejection by making yourself smaller. You soften your truth, dim your presence, or hold back your needs to avoid being too much. It can leave you feeling unseen, resentful, and uncertain if there's space for your full self. What emotion surged after the first kill was the feeling of, I owe this to myself. I deserve this. I finally get to see myself for who I am and I deserve it. Give me one card to that effect. I finally get to see myself for who I am and I deserve it. I deserve to get to see myself that way. Because I never had a happy home life. I'm unfulfilled. I'm disconnected from joy, so I might as well at least get to see what would bring me clarity, which is understanding my own mind. It's not joy, but in the absence of being able to feel joy, because I feel like he felt like he was not capable of joy. His joy, that in that moment after the first kill, he recognized himself being worthy or deserving of. His joy, which wasn't joy, it was just joy for him, was going to come from understanding his mind. And after the first kill, he was like, oh, this is how I do it. This is how I understand. The loop formed. What inner cycle was being fed or released? What inner cycle was being fed or released? His mother's voice in his mind, or lack thereof, actually. It's interesting because I feel like his mother wasn't absent. I don't feel like she wasn't physically there. I feel like the problem was that she was physically there, maybe even like all the time. Maybe she was a stay-at-home mom. Maybe she worked from home. Maybe she was just home a lot. It feels like her presence met with her lack of interest in him especially on that intellectual level, that was the cycle that was continuously being fed. This card with the fire in the background makes me think of that quote. It is whichever wolf you feed, the good wolf or the bad wolf. It feels like he constantly looked at every single thing that ever happened as, that's why my mother couldn't help me understand my mind. I deserve that. Or that the difficulty that I'm having in this situation is the difficulty. It's like he was always trying to either confirm or deny why his mother couldn't hold space for his mind and why she left him alone to battle it. Because from his perspective, he's like, she's right there, but she's not helping me. How did that make him feel? She's right there, but she's not helping me. How did that make him feel? Desiring it. Like, give me crumbs. I'll accept crumbs of your love. I'll accept crumbs of your intellect. I'll accept crumbs of your sharing of problem solving strategies. It's like he just wanted to learn from her and she was afraid of his mind. How did she, okay, let's not speak for her. How did she feel about his mind? That they were one and the same. That's what I said in the last reading. He viewed her as we have one in the same mind, and she viewed it the same. Except he wanted to learn, and she was terrified. Which is interesting. What struggles did the mother have with her own mind? What struggles did the mother have with her own mind? Racing thoughts, constant and continuous racing thoughts. What is that word? When you act on those thoughts in your mind, like that impulsiveness. I can't think of the term right now for some reason. Like letting those thoughts win. It feels like that, like just acting on anything that would distract me from my thoughts. Okay, so it feels like she was very active to suppress her mind. So she was aware of the darker corners of the mind, especially with the moon here. She's aware of the darker corners of their psyche. But it feels like she found ways to continuously distract herself all the time from it. And her seeing the same thing in him, she was like, I can't deal with that. How can I distract myself from it if I'm purposefully focusing on it? So it kind of feels like, and I'm going to pull 3 cards here. Show me the scene of the mother fearing seeing herself in his mind, so hence kind of leaving him hanging to deal with it on his own because she couldn't deal with her own mind if continuously reminded of it through him. 7 of Swords, the Star, 8 of Pentacles. Yeah. I see the same type of I almost want to say mental defect. It's like this dark corner of my mind that I'm super aware of, right? The star, if I'm looking at it in you, a star is bright in the darkness. So if I'm looking at it in you, I'm doing nothing but noticing it in me. So 8 of Pentacles, I'm busybodying myself away from this. I'm not looking at it, which is going to mean that I'm not focusing on my son, which is going to mean that, whatever cycle being fed or released has everything to do with that. He felt like she couldn't hold space for him, and it feels like it has a lot to do with her seeing similarities between them in the same way that he did. But he was like, oh, her and me are one and the same. She can teach me. I can learn from her, so I don't have to deal with this. And she was like, nope, terrified. I'm not going to be reminded of that. I'm going to busybody myself away. And it feels like it just, because of whatever was going on in there, what was happening and the way that she handled it didn't mix well with whatever chemical imbalance was happening already. And it caused this reaction of what we saw happen. Now, is that the mother's fault? No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that when we're talking about the cycle that was being fed or released, that was it. And it turned into a tornado. The ritualization. How did this method evolve over time? How did this method evolve over time? I try to avoid it and that doesn't work. I'm noticing as I try to avoid feeding the cycle, I'm noticing the cycle gets stronger and intensify. The darkness is not something I can fight against anymore. It's too heavy. And every time I try, it just falls apart. So I'm not going to try. So it feels like I try to embody what I see my mom doing. I try to avoid, suppress, numb. That makes it worse. So now I'm blaming and shaming myself for the way that I tried to do it. And now I'm thinking, are we really the same? Because that strategy seems to be working fine for her. And it made me have things go way worse over here. So now it feels like, how did this method evolve over time? It feels like what happened was he tried to handle it in the way that she showed him how to handle it, which was avoidance. That didn't work. It made it worse. And then now I have rage. Now, instead of being like, wow, I want to study your mind or have you teach me mine because we're one and the same. Now you gave me this mind. I have this mind because of you and you're going to leave me high and dry and you're not even going to help me with it. It's your fault. It turned into that. It snapped. So how did this method evolve over time? Show me him going from I want to study and learn to I hate you now and I'm making that everybody else's problem. I want to study and learn, Page of Swords in reverse, but it doesn't work. So then I figure out, what can I do? I see this dark cloud that has been following me for so long, and I focus all of my different avenues on it. Everything that's happening to me is the fault of this dark cloud. Show me his views on how that dark cloud was his mother. Nine of Swords in reverse. It's like the thing that never left my mind. The thing that was the reason I could sleep when there was hope, and the reason that I turned to rage when the hope was no more. Very interesting. What the messenger and Nine of Swords in reverse, stillness of the mind. So it's like, when I'm alone with my thoughts, all of my thoughts are surrounding that dark cloud of the mind. So everything, every situation, every scenario feeds into that. So in the beginning, it was like, I want to learn it. I want to learn it. So I feel like before the killing started, there was likely a lot of studying anything that, or being in close proximity to law enforcement or something. It's like this person hid so well because they spent a long time studying it all. But then there was that flips of the switch moment where it went from I want to study it to rage. I want to punish for it. I want to punish. I don't know. Like I just want to dish out the amount of pain that I've been holding in so that I can study it, but not from a way that anyone else can teach me, because everyone else has denied teaching me it. Everyone else being my mother. Everyone else has denied teaching me it. So now I'm going to get my power back by forcibly taking the lessons that I need to learn from the people that I'm taking their lives. Anyway, so that feels to be how the method evolved over time. It went from I want to study it, which is why he was able to get away with things, because he studied it and like obsessively. Show me him obsessively studying, or like what he obsessively studied, or something like that. There's that same card, Page of Swords in reverse. It's like what I studied wasn't what I ended up using, but I got a foundation from it. So I feel like he probably studied other killers. And it's like I didn't do it in the way that they did it, but I got some baseline foundational type of ideas from it. Interesting. Okay. The myth he told himself. What internal narrative justified the violence? What internal narrative justified the violence? I have no other option. Surrender to the darkness that's always been there and is just waiting to explode into some kind of action. So I might as well have it be calculated action so I can at least study it. I almost want to say he felt like he was doing something good because by studying it, he was stopping the cycle. Would it be fair to say that this is someone who did not have children? Yeah, I don't think this person had children. It's like because I'm studying this, I'm able to break the cycle and be aware that I should not reproduce. It's almost like that's kind of where the anger for the mother came from. He's like, you should have known not to reproduce. Why would you reproduce with this mind? And I feel like it's almost that's that click moment. It turned from I want to study it to like, why would you reproduce with this mind? King of Pentacles keeps coming out over and over. It's like he only found value in his life if he was trying to. I would almost say that this is someone who probably had some kind of journal where they were documenting all of this, like documenting their thoughts or their feelings. Like if they would have found this person, I feel like they would have found a mother load of like, maybe not a manifesto so much as like a criminal autopsy, kind of like I say in the intro. Yeah, victory, victory. It's like double confirmation. It's like this person was able to believe that they were doing something that was in some way commendable almost. I think that's what the word with the King of Pentacles that's coming to mind is, commendable, because they felt like they were studying something and making sense of something so that those who had a mind like him and his mother's would know better than to reproduce. Vulnerability. Because there's no way, at least he viewed, my cat came in, there was no way, there was no survival or defense system that could battle against what was ingrained in him in his mind. Yeah, death in reverse. There's no change that could be had. I almost feel like this is someone who was getting some kind of data together of like, if you have this kind of mind, do not reproduce because it will cause this. And I almost feel like that was the fascination with women. It almost gives the vibes of like, I find those who are discarded anyway, or who are damsel in distress maybe anyway. Knight of Cups. So I can swoop in and go from I can give you something, I can help you in some way, to but I'm actually gonna do the worst to you. And that was meant to replicate the way his mother made him feel. Unprotected on the bottom of the deck. So what internal narrative justified the violence? I am studying Even if it's just for me, although I really feel like there's something written down somewhere. Maybe he just decided to burn it and not share it. Maybe it just was never found. I don't know. Um, but that's the narrative. It's the notion of I'm studying something here. I'm making it so that people like my mom will not reproduce. I'm making sense of it. Or I'm at least making sense of like why I'm not going to. Let me get my cat out of my office. 1 second. Okay, the escalation point. When did control start slipping? When did control start slipping? And in which way did control slip? Okay. A debt owed. A debt owed that took over everything. What's the debt owed? It's interesting because when did control start slipping? I don't feel like there ever was control. I feel like what this is saying is the debt that I just referenced without even realizing that that's what I was referencing. That debt is the same debt that's always been in place for him. He has always been almost entirely indebted to needing to understand his mind. The debt is Eight of Swords in reverse. Because Queen of Pentacles in reverse. I need to find emotional balance by deprogramming what my mother did to my mind. The debt was always in place. When did control start slipping? He never had control. It was always this wound that was controlling him. It just manifested in different ways because it went from I want to learn it to rage. So control didn't slip because there never was control, but it shifted in that way of I no longer just want to learn it. I want to enact it as this plot of revenge. So what exactly happened that flip? That flip. Explain it from his point of view. Overpowering and rage. I'm using the deck that has the fire in the background instead of the regular sky. Intuition. I knew it in a bad way. I knew that bad thing was true, and now I can't unsee it. What is it? It's like he felt like his mother was able to free herself from the mental prison she left him alone in. I don't know how. I'm not getting a clear insight on what made him have this realization, but I feel like it was something very small because I'm not picking up on like a grand, like here or there. I'm not picking up on like a grand moment. I'm picking up on like a conversation or something. And it's like, how can you be okay and just leave me here not being okay? And in that, what seemed like a small moment at the time, it flipped from I want to study it, Hermit on the bottom, Ten of Swords in reverse. I need to take these swords. I need to deconstruct my own mental prison. Because it's almost like he looked at his mother in a moment and was like, there's a way that she deconstructed this. And she's not teaching me how, so I'm going to do it in a different way. And this birthed everything that happened next. So when did control start slipping? It didn't have to. It just showed up differently. The lack of control. He never had control. It was always this, I'll call it a notion, right? It was always that was controlling him. But it went from I want to study it and be a student of it to I'm using it as a weapon against everyone that I can. Everyone that I feel like I could gain something from studying their reaction to what I've created into a weapon. The void beneath it all. The void beneath it all. What core truth was never confronted? I mean, the burden of what happened at home that I never could gain control over. What core truth was never confronted? How what happened at home can put me on pause. I was never able to get past this. This is the burden from the last question. This is the thing that always controlled me. I could never get control over. Why? The burden from my unhappy home life. What did this cause? I could never take steps forward. My plans always fell apart. And here's the dark cloud that we keep referencing was looming over his head that everything went into. I'm having this experience. I'm blaming this dark cloud. I lost this person. I'm blaming this dark cloud. This happened at my job. I'm blaming this dark cloud. Everything went into making the dark cloud fuller with rain. And then one day, the cloud decided to rain because he felt his emotions for the first time in a long time. He felt like it's not fair that she broke out. It's almost like for a while he was like, well, I'm in this mental prison, but at least I'm not the only one. She's in it too, but she's in solitude and I'm in solitude. But there was a moment that shifted that broke that he was like, no, she's not in the cage. I'm the only one in the cage. It shifted everything in that moment. So what core truth was never confronted? That it was his own responsibility to free himself from the cage, temperance in reverse, and the world. It was his responsibility to face the darkness and bring it to a cycle of completion. He was responsible for that. Should his mom have maybe tried different strategies that could have worked better for him? I'm sure. Yeah, it seems like it. Yeah. Avoidance is probably not the way to deal with something like this. However, it was still, as he became a young adult, his responsibility, just as it is all of our responsibility, to take what hasn't been healed yet and find a way to heal it. That's what reparenting is. So this isn't an excuse being made for him, but that's what I see. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead, get the transcript from this reading, put it all in, and then I will conversate to see if the reading matches the dynamics of the case. Welcome back to part 3. Now we're going to compare what came out in the readings to what AI says about the profile of the killer. Can you confirm that I just uploaded a transcript of a psychic reading of Jack the Ripper?
Yes, I can confirm that you just shared a detailed transcript of a psychic reading focused on Jack the Ripper. It covers a deep dive into his psychological and emotional landscape, exploring themes like his original wound, the mother dynamic, and how that might have shaped his actions. Feel free to ask any questions or dive deeper into the detail.
Would someone who experienced this type of maternal neglect combined with intellectual invalidation be more likely to develop a violent, compulsive inner loop tied to power and control?
It's definitely possible. Maternal neglect and intellectual invalidation, especially in early childhood, can create deep emotional wounds. These wounds can sometimes lead individuals to develop coping mechanisms that revolve around power and control as a way to regain a sense of agency. While not everyone with these experiences will become violent, in some cases it can contribute to a complex emotional and psychological landscape that might lead to compulsive or destructive behaviors.
When it comes to the transcript, does this emotional pattern of feeling unseen, feeling intellectually abandoned, feeling mentally isolated, does this match any known psychological profiles of real serial killers or obsessive offenders?
Yes, there are definitely patterns in the profiles of some real life serial killers and obsessive offenders that align with these emotional patterns. For instance, feelings of being unseen, intellectually invalidated, or mentally isolated often surface in the backgrounds of individuals like Ted Bundy or Edmund Kemper, who experienced complex familial relationships and felt misunderstood or invalidated. These feelings can contribute to a sense of alienation and, in some cases, fuel a desire for control or power as a way to compensate for those early wounds. Of course, every case is unique, but these emotional patterns do appear in some known profiles.
If you were to say that Jack the Ripper studied some serial killers, who could he potentially have studied based off of his crimes?
It's an intriguing thought. Given that Jack the Ripper's crimes took place in the late 1800s, he wouldn't have had contemporary serial killers to study in the way we think of today, but he might have been aware of notorious criminals and murderers of earlier times, like the London burglars or other infamous figures from the early 19th century. The concept of a serial killer wasn't really defined yet, but there were certainly sensationalized crimes that could have influenced him or at least been known to him.
If he was trying to study his own mind through similar harsh acts, what could he have been studying around that time that could have given them that studyable information?
In the late 1800s, the understanding of criminal psychology and the human mind was still in its early stages. Someone like Jack the Ripper, if he were trying to study his own mind, might have drawn from the early works of criminal anthropology or the burgeoning field of psychiatry. He might have been influenced by societal debates on nature versus nurture, or even by the idea of moral insanity, which was a concept floating around at that time. Essentially, he could have been trying to understand his own impulses and darkness through the lens of whatever rudimentary psychological theories were available at the time.
What would be one or two psychological theories at that time that would line up with something that he would study if what I said in the reading was true?
If we think about the late 19th century, some of the emerging psychological theories or areas of study that might resonate with the profile you described could include early explorations of criminal anthropology and the study of deviant behavior. For example, Cesare Lombroso's theory of the born criminal, which suggested that certain individuals were biologically predisposed to criminality, might have been something that fascinated someone with these internal struggles. Additionally, early psychoanalytic ideas, even though Freud's theories came a bit later, were beginning to take shape and could have provided some framework for understanding the mind and behavior in new ways.
Okay, so would the described sensation of finding oneself through the first kill match the emotional high observed in thrill-seeking or identity-affirming killers?
Yes, it does align with what is often observed in certain types of killers, especially those who are driven by thrill seeking or a search for identity. The first act of violence can sometimes create a powerful emotional high, giving the individual a sense of control, power, or self discovery that they might not have felt before. This sensation can be addictive and can reinforce their behavior, making them feel like they've uncovered a true part of themselves. This pattern of finding identity and validation through violence is something that has been noted in the profiles of certain serial offenders.
Is the evolution from study to ritual to rage-fueled control a common arc in violent criminal escalation, particularly in those with early maternal trauma or mental health repression?
Yes, that kind of progression can be seen in some cases. Individuals who start with a more intellectual curiosity about their impulses or behaviors can over time ritualize their actions as a way of coping or gaining a sense of control. When there's underlying trauma, especially from early maternal relationships or repressed mental health struggles, that ritual can sometimes evolve into rage and a need for dominance or control. This arc of escalation is known in some violent offenders, where initial curiosity or fascination eventually turns into something more dangerous and compulsive.
What would you say would be the ritualistic imprint in Jack the Ripper's case?
In Jack the Ripper's case, ritualistic imprint seems to lie in the way he meticulously mutilated and posed his victims. His crimes had a very methodical nature, which suggests that he followed a specific pattern or ritual. This ritual might have provided him with a sense of power and control, and it likely reinforced whatever psychological needs he was trying to fulfill. So his signature way of operating, the consistency in the types of wounds, and the way he left his victims all point to a ritualistic pattern that became his imprint.
What part of the reading do you feel would align with why that is the case?
I think the part of the reading that explores his feelings of intellectual abandonment and the need to be understood really aligns with that. The idea that he felt isolated and misunderstood might have driven him to create a ritual that gave him a sense of control and identity. By repeating a specific pattern, he might have felt like he was asserting himself and being seen, even if it was in a dark and twisted way. This need to create a pattern or ritual could have been a way for him to gain a sense of purpose or understanding in his own mind.
Are there any documented cases where a killer's crimes were driven not by pleasure, but by the obsessive need to understand their own mind?
Yes, there are a few documented cases where a killer's motivation seemed to stem more from an obsessive need to understand their own psychology rather than purely deriving pleasure. One example is Edmund Kemper, who committed his crimes partially driven by a desire to analyze and understand his own psyche, often reflecting deeply on his relationship with his mother and how it shaped him. Another example is Jeffrey Dahmer, who expressed that he was trying to understand his own compulsions and loneliness through his actions. While these motivations are complex and often mixed with other factors, they do show that not all offenders are purely driven by pleasure. Some are driven by a disturbing need for self-understanding.
What would be the code that the mind is running over and over and over on repeat that would lead to that obsessive desire for understanding after being misunderstood?
It often comes down to a loop of questions like, why am I this way? Or what made me different? And even how can I make sense of the pain or the isolation I feel? This kind of mental code is driven by a deep need to decode their own experiences and to find some kind of logic in what they went through. When someone feels misunderstood or unseen, it can create this obsessive drive to understand themselves, almost like they're searching for answers to explain their own identity and to find a sense of meaning or resolution.
Does the dynamic of the killer seeing his mother as having escaped a shared mental prison while he remained trapped support the rage shift described in my reading?
Absolutely. That dynamic would definitely support the shift from a place of perhaps curiosity or confusion into full-blown rage. If he perceived that his mother had freed herself from the mental struggles that they shared while he remained stuck in suffering, it could easily fuel feelings of betrayal, abandonment, and deep resentment. That perceived injustice that he was left alone in that mental prison could be a powerful catalyst for transforming his initial emotions into rage and a desire for control or revenge, which fits the pattern you described in your reading.
Give me an example scenario that would fit what I said in the reading. In the reading, I described it as like a very inconsequential, small moment that lit that flame from curiosity to rage. Paint me the scene of what that could have looked like from his perspective.
Sure. Imagine a moment where he unexpectedly sees his mother enjoying a simple, joyful interaction with someone else. maybe laughing easily, looking carefree and at peace. In that instant, he might realize that she has found a way to move on or escape the mental struggles that he still feels trapped in. From his perspective, it could feel like a profound betrayal, as if she's abandoned the shared struggle and left him behind in that mental prison. This seemingly small, everyday moment could ignite a surge of rage, transforming his feelings of curiosity or longing for understanding into something much darker and more destructive.
Does my reading's explanation of ritual as a form of self-study align with known patterns of compulsive or symbolic killers like Jack the Ripper?
Yes, it does align with patterns seen in some compulsive or symbolic killers. For individuals like Jack the Ripper, ritual often serves multiple purposes beyond just the act itself. It can be a way for them to explore their own psyche, to exert control over the environment, and to create a sense of meaning or understanding in their actions. This form of self-study through ritual allows them to repeatedly act out their internal conflicts and symbolically process their emotions, which is something that has been noted in the profiles of certain historical and modern serial offenders.
So that being said, is it psychologically plausible that this person viewed the murders as an act of control, punishment, and study rather than sadistic pleasure or randomness?
Yes, it's definitely psychologically plausible. In cases like this, the motivation can be complex and multi-layered. The murders could indeed serve as a way for him to exert control over his environment, to punish others symbolically for the perceived betrayals and neglect he experienced, and to study both his own mind and the reactions of society. This kind of psychological framework means that the acts were methodical and meaningful to him rather than just random acts of violence or purely for sadistic pleasure.
In what ways does my reading align with known evidence in that area that you just talked about?
Your reading aligns with known evidence in a few interesting ways. For instance, the methodical nature of Jack the Ripper's crimes suggests a level of control and intention behind each act. The way he posed his victims and the specific mutilations he performed point to a ritualistic approach, which aligns with the idea of using the crimes as a form of self-study or to fulfill a deeper psychological need. Additionally, the notion that he might have been seeking control or trying to process feelings of betrayal or abandonment fits with the psychological profiles of some known serial offenders who also carried deep personal wounds. So overall, your reading's perspective on his motivations does resonate with patterns that have been observed in real life cases.
Would a person with these described emotional imprints be more likely to target women who reflected powerlessness, rejection, or maternal archetypes?
Yes, it's quite likely. Often individuals who carry these kinds of deep emotional imprints and unresolved trauma, especially related to maternal figures, may subconsciously choose victims who represent that powerlessness or who echo the characteristics of the maternal archetype they feel wounded by. It can be a way of symbolically reenacting their own trauma, seeking a form of control or dominance over the emotions and experiences that once made them feel powerless. In that sense, targeting women who reflect those archetypes could be a psychological attempt to resolve or understand their own past.
If someone like Jack the Ripper was going to pick a different type of victim than a powerless, rejected, or maternal female, what would a secondary victim archetype be for Jack the Ripper?
A secondary victim archetype for someone like Jack the Ripper might be individuals who symbolize authority or confidence, essentially the opposite of the powerless archetype. This could be someone who exudes a sense of control or self-assuredness, which might provoke feelings of resentment or challenge within him. Targeting individuals who represent a form of strength or authority could serve as a way for him to symbolically dismantle or overpower what he perceives as a source of his own inner conflict.
So why do you think that Jack the Ripper didn't choose to go with that type of victim?
It's tough to say for certain, but it's possible that targeting women who appear vulnerable or represented a maternal archetype felt more directly tied to his own unresolved emotions and trauma. It might have been a way for him to reenact or gain control over those feelings more intimately. Women who reflected powerlessness or maternal characteristics might have been easier for him to project his inner conflicts onto, making them the focus of his ritualistic acts instead.
Does the energetic profile of the person described from my reading align with what we know historically or psychologically about Jack the Ripper's victim selection, crime scene staging, and behavioral patterns?
In many ways, yes. The profile you described in your reading aligns with what we know about Jack the Ripper's patterns. His victim selection, which focused on women in vulnerable positions, often in impoverished areas, does reflect a psychological need to exert control and possibly to reenact or process deeper emotional wounds. The ritualistic elements of his crimes, like the way he staged the crime scenes and the specific mutilations, also point to a methodical and intentional approach, which aligns with the idea of using these acts as a form of self-study or a way to work through internal conflicts. So your reading definitely captures a lot of what we know historically and psychologically about him.
In what ways would it contradict?
In some ways, targeting a more authoritative or confident victim would contradict the psychological pattern of reenacting his own past wins. If his primary motivation was to exert control over feelings of vulnerability or betrayal tied to maternal figures, then choosing a different type of victim could disrupt that symbolic narrative. It could also introduce different emotional triggers that might not align with his deeper psychological needs or goals. In that sense, it would break away from the internal logic that drove his original choice of victims.
Give me a short description of what a day in the life would look like for the person described in my reading.
A day in the life of someone like the person you described would likely be filled with a constant undercurrent of tension and obsessive thoughts. They might start their day feeling restless or anxious, constantly replaying memories or emotions tied to their past. Throughout the day, they might engage in activities that seem normal on the surface, but underneath, they're observing people, analyzing behaviors, and looking for patterns. They might be drawn to certain locations that trigger their obsessions, and they spend a lot of time in their own head planning, reflecting, and feeding that internal loop of control and understanding.
So in my reading, I described this as someone that people wouldn't really expect. Give me like this is the person in your life that blank. Like, so people could place this person energetically.
Got it. So this is the person in your life who might come across as unassuming and perfectly ordinary, blending into their surroundings with ease. They might be that quiet neighbor who always smiles and waves, or the coworker who is polite but keeps to themselves. Energetically, they don't stand out in a way that would make you suspect anything unusual, making them someone you'd never expect to have such a complex inner world.
But when it comes to someone like Jack the Ripper, what would their tell be? Like, what would your intuition mark as a red flag that's undeniable?
When it comes to someone like Jack the Ripper, their tell might be an almost too perfect calmness or a subtle intensity in their gaze that feels a bit off. Your intuition might pick up on moments where they seem overly observant or too composed in situations that would normally cause a bit of nervousness or emotion. It could be a fleeting sense that there's something they're holding back, or a certain intensity in their presence that feels out of place, even if you can't quite put your finger on it.
Compare that to what you feel like a day in the life of Jack the Ripper would have looked like.
A day in the life of Jack the Ripper would likely be filled with a sense of hidden tension and meticulous observation. On the surface, he might go about daily routines without drawing attention, blending into the crowds of Victorian London, but underneath his mind would be constantly analyzing, planning, and possibly revisiting the scenes of his crimes. He might have moved through his day with a sort of eerie calmness, all the while harboring that intense secret world inside his mind. The contrast between his outward normalcy and the inner turmoil would be striking, and that might be what makes him so difficult to detect.
What two known like superhero villain or movie villains would you compare to Jack the Ripper? Like who plus who equals Jack the Ripper?
I'd say Jack the Ripper could be compared to a blend of the Joker from the Batman universe, who thrives on chaos and unpredictability, and Hannibal Lecter, who is meticulous, highly intelligent, and operates with a chilling calmness, combining the Joker's chaotic, almost theatrical unpredictability with Hannibal Lecter's calculated and intellectual approach creates a mix that echoes the mystery and darkness surrounding Jack the Ripper.
Let's go off of the notion that my reading about the profile of Jack the Ripper is correct. Give us a short rundown of what his life looked like start to finish, including his childhood, the breaking moment of what led to the killings, and how he ended up not getting caught.
Sure. So, starting from childhood, he might have grown up in a household where he felt emotionally neglected or misunderstood, particularly by a maternal figure. As he grew up, these feelings of being unseen could have developed into deeper resentments and a need for control. The breaking moment might have been a seemingly small incident where he felt deeply betrayed or abandoned, and that could have triggered his need to act out these inner conflicts through violence. Throughout his life, he likely maintained a facade of normalcy, which helped him avoid suspicion. And by choosing victims who were vulnerable and living in an area where crimes were hard to solve, he ultimately managed to avoid being caught.
So then, does this reading reveal a mind that would commit these specific acts in this specific way? Why or why not?
Yes, the reading does suggest a mind that could commit these specific acts in this particular way. The combination of deep emotional wounds, a need for control, and a ritualistic approach to violence aligns with what we know about Jack the Ripper's crimes. The meticulousness and the specific targeting of victims suggest someone who was acting out an internal narrative, and the reading's insights into his psyche support the idea that these acts were intentional and symbolic for him rather than random or purely impulsive.
Is there anything else that you feel like should be asked to further clarify the profile of Jack the Ripper that wasn't included in the original readings?
You might consider exploring more about his daily life and social interactions, like what kind of job he held or how he maintained that sense of normalcy around others. Looking into any potential hobbies or interests might also reveal more about his psyche. Additionally, diving deeper into any significant relationships he might have had, friendships, or even acquaintances, could provide more insight into how he balanced these darker impulses with his everyday persona.
And in closing, if you could paint the picture of what it was like inside the mind of Jack the Ripper based off of known facts in combination with my reading, paint the picture for us, please.
Inside the mind of Jack the Ripper, you'd find a storm of conflicting emotions and intense obsessions. There would be a deep well of resentment and hate from feeling misunderstood and neglected, especially in his formative years. This emotional pain would likely transform into a need for control and understanding, driving him to meticulously plan and carry out his crimes. There would be a sense of detachment, as if he viewed the world through a lens of analysis, always searching for patterns and meaning. His mind would be a place of both chaos and order, where the darkness of his impulses was carefully hidden beneath a calm and calculated exterior.
Give me one character from a TV show or movie or series of some kind that would most closely relate to the life of Jack the Ripper that he portrayed externally.
A character that comes to mind is Dexter Morgan from the TV show Dexter. Externally, Dexter appears as a normal, even likable forensic analyst with a calm and composed demeanor, which makes him blend into everyday life easily. Underneath, of course, he has a complex and darker internal world, similar to how Jack the Ripper might have navigated his own duality.
Cool. Well, that is all. If you would like me to go into those questions with Jack the Ripper, let me know in the comments and I can do a bonus episode on that. If not, then I'm going to go to part 2 with the next one on the list. As always, please remember this is an energy reading. It's all alleged, my opinion, not facts. Thank you for watching.